Modern Queen Tales presents An Offer He Couldn't Refuse. Chapter 1. The Devil's Bargain. The smell of antiseptic and stale coffee had become the defining scent of my existence. I sat in the hard plastic chair beside my brother's hospital bed, watching the rhythmic rise and fall of Aaron's thin chest. He was only 14, but the aggressive leukemia ravaging his body made him look like a fragile, hollowed-out ghost of the vibrant boy he used to be. I held his cold hand, tracing the faint blue veins beneath his translucent skin. "I'm going to fix this, Aaron," I whispered into the quiet hum of the machinery keeping him alive. "I promise you." But promises couldn't pay the mounting stack of bills on my kitchen counter. The experimental treatment Aaron needed, his only real shot at survival, was entirely out of pocket. My waitressing job and the meager savings I had scraped together were like throwing pennies into a bottomless well. The bank had laughed me out of their office when I begged for a loan. I was drowning, and the water was rising fast. That was when I remembered the whispers. Growing up on the bruised edges of the city, you heard things. You heard about the Marino family. You heard about Cal Marino, the enigmatic, ruthless Don who ruled the city's underworld with an iron fist and a heart made of frost. He was a phantom, a boogeyman to some, but to others, those desperate enough, he was the ultimate, terrifying lender of last resort. But I didn't want a loan. I knew I could never pay it back, and defaulting on Cal Marino meant ending up at the bottom of the river. I needed something else. I had heard a rumor, slipped from the lips of a drunken mob enforcer at the diner where I worked, that Cal Marino was under immense pressure from the syndicate's old guard. He needed an heir to solidify his power, but he refused to take a wife, viewing marriage as a vulnerability. He needed a vessel, a surrogate. It was a mad, desperate idea, a deal with the devil. But looking at Aaron's pale face, I knew I would walk through the fires of hell if it meant saving him. It took me 3 days to track down the avenue to reach him. I dressed in my best clothes, a modest black skirt and a white blouse, and walked into the Obsidian, an exclusive, members-only club in the heart of the financial district. I was patted down by men whose suits cost more than my life, and finally led into a dimly lit, sound-proofed office that smelled of expensive bourbon and old leather. Behind a massive mahogany desk sat Cal Marino. The breath caught in my throat. The rumors hadn't done him justice. He was breathtakingly handsome, but in a harsh, predatory way. His dark hair was swept back, his jawline looked as though it could cut glass, and his eyes, a deep, fathomless obsidian, locked onto me with a chilling intensity. He radiated power and a cold, suppressed violence. Emily Parker. His voice was a low, dark rumble that vibrated in my chest. "My men tell me you've been asking very dangerous questions. You have exactly 2 minutes to explain why I shouldn't have you thrown out, or worse." I forced my knees to stop trembling. I stood tall, meeting his terrifying gaze. "I'm here to make a business proposition, Mr. Marino." He leaned back, a cynical smirk playing on his lips. "A waitress from the South Side has a business proposition for me." "I'm listening, but the clock is ticking." "I know you need an heir," I said, the words rushing out before I could lose my nerve. "I know the syndicate wants your bloodline secured, but you don't want a wife to complicate your empire. I want to offer myself as a surrogate." Cal went perfectly still. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The predatory amusement vanished from his face, replaced by a sharp, assessing calculation. "And what," he asked softly, dangerously, "do you want in return?" $2 million, I said, my voice remarkably steady. "Paid directly to Seattle Grace Hospital for my brother's treatment, plus living expenses until the baby is born. Once the child is delivered, I walk away. You get your heir, your legacy is secure, and I get my brother back." He stood up, slowly. He was massive, towering over me as he walked around the desk, He circled me like a wolf assessing a lamb. I held my breath as he stopped right in front of me. I could smell his cologne, sandalwood, and spice. "You're asking for a fortune," he murmured, looking down at me. "And you're offering to tie yourself to the most dangerous man in this city for 9 months. Do you have any idea what my world is like, lady?" "I don't care about your world," I retorted, lifting my chin. "I care about Aaron. Will you do it?" Cal stared into my eyes for a long, agonizing moment. He was looking for deception, for greed, but all I had to offer was pure, unadulterated desperation. "A strictly professional arrangement," Cal finally said, his tone devoid of any emotion. "You will live in my estate, you will be monitored. You will eat what my doctors tell you to eat, do what they tell you to do. There will be no emotional attachment. You are an incubator. Nothing more." The words stung, but I swallowed the humiliation. "Agreed. Then we have a deal, Miss Parker. Your brother's treatment will be fully funded by tomorrow morning." I closed my eyes, a single tear of profound relief escaping down my cheek. I had sold my body, perhaps my soul, to the devil. But Aaron was going to live. Chapter 2. The Ice King's Fortress. Within 48 hours, my life changed beyond recognition. Aaron was transferred to the VIP wing of the hospital, the top specialists hovering over him. The relief was intoxicating. But the price of that relief was my freedom. I was moved into Cal's estate, a sprawling modern fortress nestled on the cliffs overlooking the ocean. It was surrounded by high concrete walls, electrified fencing, and armed guards who prowled the grounds like silent phantoms. My room was essentially a gilded cage. It was massive, decorated in cold, minimalist tones of gray and white. It felt like a high-end hotel room, devoid of any warmth or personality. The initial weeks were a blur of medical appointments. The IVF process was clinical, invasive, and emotionally exhausting. Throughout it all, Cal was a distant, imposing figure. We rarely saw each other. When we did cross paths in the massive dining room or the echoing hallways, his nods were curt. He was the Ice King, completely detached from the human element of our transaction. He was treating this exactly as he promised, a business deal. But as the weeks turned into a month, the isolation began to wear on me. I spent my days reading in the vast library, walking the manicured gardens under the watchful eyes of the guards, and calling Aaron, whose voice was already sounding stronger. Then, the morning came when I stared down at the little plastic stick on my bathroom vanity. 2 pink lines. I was pregnant with the Mafia boss's child. My hands shook as I sat on the edge of the large marble bathtub. A strange, complicated knot of emotions tightened in my chest. This went beyond a mere business. There was a life growing inside me. Later that evening, I was summoned to Cal's study. He was sitting behind his desk, reviewing documents. He looked up as I entered, his dark eyes assessing me. "The doctor called," Cal said, his voice as smooth and cold as glass. He confirmed the test results. "You're pregnant." "Yes," I said quietly, clasping my hands in front of me. Cal stood up and poured himself a glass of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. He didn't offer me any, obviously. He took a sip, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the dark ocean. "Your diet will be adjusted tomorrow. You will no longer walk near the cliff edge, even with the guards. The perimeter of your daily walks is restricted to the inner courtyard," he commanded. I bristled. "I'm pregnant, Cal, not an invalid. I need fresh air." He turned his head slowly, his eyes flashing with a sudden, sharp intensity. It was the first time I had called him by his first name. "You are carrying my blood." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. "You will do exactly as I say." My enemies would love nothing more than to find a vulnerability to exploit. "You are now the most valuable asset in this house." You will be protected as such. I'm not an asset, I snapped back, my hormones and frustration getting the better of my fear. I'm a human being. Cal stared at me, visibly taken aback by my defiance. Most people cowed in his presence. For a second, I thought he might explode. Instead, a strange, almost imperceptible shift occurred in his expression. The ice cracked, just a fraction. He looked down at my flat stomach, then back up to my eyes. Go to bed, Emily. It's late. It was the first time he had used my first name too. Chapter 3. The Thaw. The pregnancy hit me hard in the first trimester. The morning sickness was debilitating. I spent days curled up on the bathroom tiles, unable to keep anything down. One afternoon, I was leaning over the sink, splashing cold water on my face, feeling utterly miserable and alone. The door to my suite opened. I jumped, turning to see Cal standing in the doorway. He looked entirely out of place in my bathroom, his dark suit a stark contrast to the white marble. He frowned deeply at my pale face and trembling frame. You look terrible, he observed bluntly. Thank you, I croaked, wiping my mouth with a towel. Your charm is boundless. To my shock, he didn't leave. Instead, he stepped into the bathroom. He reached out, his large, warm hand wrapping gently around my elbow, supporting my weight. The contact sent a jolt of electricity up my arm. Come, he said softly. He guided me back to the bed and helped me lie down. He pulled the heavy duvet over me. Then, he picked up a sleek black phone from the nightstand and pressed a button. Bring up ginger tea, real ginger, not the powdered trash, and dry toast, now. He barked into the receiver. He sat on the edge of my bed. The sheer size of him made the king-sized mattress dip. I stared at him in quiet astonishment. The ruthless crime lord was playing nurse. You don't have to be here, I mumbled, closing my eyes against the spinning room. I protect what's mine, he replied, though the words lacked their usual icy sting. I'm not yours. The baby is. Cal was silent for a long time. When I opened my eyes, he was staring at my face, an unreadable expression in his dark depths. Slowly, he reached out, his fingers brushing a stray strand of sweaty hair away from my forehead. His touch was incredibly gentle, a stark contrast to the violence he was known for. Get some sleep, Emily, he murmured. From that day on, the dynamic shifted. The Ice King began to melt, drop by drop. He started joining me for dinner, demanding I eat properly. When I complained about backaches in my second trimester, he silently replaced my mattress with a state-of-the-art orthopedic one. When a maid accidentally bumped into me in the hallway, Cal's roar of fury echoed through the house. And he would have fired her on the spot if I hadn't intervened and begged him not to. He was becoming fiercely, instinctively protective of me, and to my absolute horror, I was beginning to look forward to his presence. I saw the man beneath the monster, a man burdened by immense power, fiercely loyal, and surprisingly tender. I was falling in love with a man who had bought my womb. Chapter 4. The Viper. As my belly swelled, confirming the success of our arrangement to the outside world, Cal decided it was time to introduce me to his inner circle. He hosted a formal dinner at the estate for his capos and trusted associates. That was the night I met Monica Rossi. She was the daughter of an allied Mafia boss, a breathtakingly beautiful socialite, with venom in her veins. She wore a blood-red gown that left little to the imagination, and moved with the arrogant grace of a woman used to getting her way. Rumor had it she had been grooming herself to be Cal's wife for years, viewing it as a strategic merger. My presence and my pregnant belly was a massive insult to her ambitions. She cornered me in the powder room, while Cal was deep in discussion with Roberto, his second in command. Roberto was a slick, handsome man with eyes that never quite stopped calculating. I never liked the way he looked at me, so Monica purred, leaning against the marble counter and examining her perfect manicure. You're the incubator. I must say, Cal's tastes have plummeted. A street rat from the south side? I washed my hands calmly, refusing to let her see she rattled me. I'm carrying his child, Monica. That's all you need to know. Oh, don't get too comfortable, sweetie. She sneered, her eyes dropping to my stomach. Once you pop that kid out, you'll be thrown back into the gutter where you belong. Cal doesn't do feelings, he does business. And you're just a transaction. He'll need a real woman, a queen to stand beside him, not a paid vessel. Her words hit my deepest insecurities perfectly. I felt a flush of humiliation rise in my cheeks. Suddenly, the bathroom door swung open. Cal stood there, his face like thunder. He had evidently heard the tail end of the conversation. The sheer, lethal coldness rolling off him made the air in the room feel thin. He walked past Monica without even looking at her and stopped beside me. He placed a large, possessive hand on the small of my back, drawing me flush against his side. Emily, Cal said, his voice quiet and deadly, is there a problem here? No, I said softly, though I leaned into his warmth gratefully. Cal finally turned his gaze to Monica. The beautiful socialite actually took a physical step back, her confidence shattering under his glare. Monica, Cal said, each word dripping with disdain. If you ever speak to the mother of my child like that again, I will forget my alliance with your father, and I will cut your tongue out of your head. Do you understand me? Monica paled, her mouth opening and closing in shock. Cal, I was just... Get out, he commanded softly. Monica fled. Cal turned to me, his expression softening instantly. Are you all right? Yes, I breathed. He reached down, his hand hovering over my swollen belly before resting gently against it. He felt a kick, and a rare, genuine smile touched his lips. It made him look devastatingly handsome. She's right about one thing, Cal murmured, his thumb stroking my side. I don't do feelings. He looked up, his obsidian eyes locking onto mine, burning with an intensity that made my heart race. But I think I'm making an exception. Chapter 5. Crossfire. The reality of Cal's world shattered our fragile domestic bubble violently in my 7th month. Cal had insisted on taking me to a private, heavily guarded clinic for a specialized ultrasound. We were in the back of his armored SUV, the city blurring past. Cal was holding my hand, a habit he had developed recently that he never bothered to explain. Suddenly, a massive black truck ran a red light, slamming directly into the side of our lead security vehicle. The explosion rocked our SUV. Get down! Cal roared. Before I could process what was happening, he unbuckled his seatbelt and practically threw himself over me, using his massive body as a human shield. Automatic gunfire erupted, bullets pinging furiously against the bulletproof glass of our SUV. My heart hammered against my ribs. I screamed as a high-caliber round finally spiderwebbed the window next to us. Drive! Get us out of the kill zone! Cal bellowed at the driver over the deafening noise. Our driver floored the gas, the heavy SUV ramming through a blockade of enemy cars. I was crushed beneath Cal, trembling uncontrollably, terrified for my life and the life of the baby. I've got you, Cal rasped in my ear, his grip on me iron tight. I've got you, Emily. I won't let them touch you. We managed to lose the pursuers in the winding industrial district, arriving at one of Cal's underground safe houses. We were ushered inside by frantic guards. Once the heavy steel doors locked behind us, Cal finally pulled back. He checked me over frantically, his hands running down my arms, my face, my belly. Are you hurt? Tell me you're not hurt, he demanded, his voice rough with a panic I had never heard before. I'm okay, I gasped. Tears streaming down my face. Cal let out a ragged breath and pulled me into a crushing embrace. He buried his face in my neck, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe. I wrapped my arms around his broad shoulders, burying my face in his chest. In the middle of a war zone, smelling of gunpowder and fear, I realized something profound. I felt entirely, perfectly safe in the arms of a mafia boss. Later, as I sat on a sofa drinking water, I overheard Cal talking to Roberto on a secure line in the next room. "The shipment at the docks is exposed, boss," Roberto was saying. "If you don't go secure it now, the Russians will seize $20 million worth of weapons." "Let them," Cal snarled without hesitation. "I am not leaving this safe house until I know my family is secure. Double the guards on Emily. If the Russians want the guns, they can have them. My priority is here. He chose me. He chose our baby over his business." The realization made my chest ache with a love so fierce it terrified me. Chapter 6. The Pathetic Ploy. The attack had escalated tensions within the syndicate. Cal was ruthlessly hunting down those responsible, leaving the estate more often. During his absences, the atmosphere in the house grew toxic. The guards, normally stoic, seemed to look at me with suspicion. I caught whispers in the hallways. Then, the storm broke. Cal returned early one evening. I was reading in the living room when the double doors burst open. Cal strode in, his face a mask of absolute terrifying fury. But he wasn't alone. Monica was trailing behind him, flanked by Roberto. Monica had a smug, triumphant smirk on her face. "What's going on?" I asked, struggling to stand up with my heavy belly. Cal walked right up to me. He didn't look angry at me. He looked furious at the world. He threw a thick manila folder onto the coffee table. Photographs spilled out. They were pictures of me, secretly meeting with a man in the gardens, a man I didn't recognize. There were printouts of bank transfers, showing large sums of money moving from a Russian syndicate account into a shell account under my name. There was a burner phone in a plastic evidence bag. "We found the phone in her mattress, boss," Roberto said gravely, playing the loyal soldier perfectly. "She's been feeding the Russians your roots. That's how they knew where you were going the day of the ambush. She sold you out for a bigger payday." Monica stepped forward, putting a delicate hand on her chest. "I'm so sorry, Cal. I tried to warn you. You brought a street rat into your home, and she bit the hand that fed her." I stared at the photos in shock. "Cal, I don't know who that man is. I've never seen him. I've never owned that phone." I looked up at him desperately. "You have to believe me." The trope in the movies always dictated this was the moment the hero doubted the heroine, the moment the misunderstanding tore them apart. I braced myself for Cal's rejection, my heart breaking. Cal stared down at the photos. Then, he looked at the burner phone. Slowly, the fury on his face melted into an expression of utter chilling amusement. He began to laugh. It was a dark, dangerous sound. He turned to Monica. "You went through all this trouble," Cal said softly, "to forge banking records, hire a body double for Emily in the dark, and plant a cheap burner phone in a room monitored by my personal closed-circuit security?" Monica's smug smile faltered. "Cal, the evidence is right there!" In a flash of movement so fast I barely registered it, Cal's hand shot out. Crack! The sound of his palm striking Monica's cheek echoed like a gunshot through the massive room. Monica shrieked, stumbling backward and collapsing onto the floor, clutching her face. Roberto lunged forward, but Cal shot him a look so murderous it froze the second in command in his tracks. "Did you honestly believe?" Cal roared, his voice shaking the crystal chandelier above us. "That I am stupid enough to fall for this pathetic amateur manipulation?" He stepped toward the cowering Monica, his fists clenched. "Emily doesn't care about money. She sold herself to me to save her dying brother. She shielded my child with her body during that ambush. Furthermore, my security cameras caught your little rat planting that phone 3 hours ago." Monica sobbed on the floor, her red lipstick smeared. "I should kill you right here," Cal hissed. "But you aren't worth the blood on my rugs. Get out of my house, Monica. If I ever see your face in this city again, I will send you back to your father in pieces. Guards." Throw this trash out. Two burly guards dragged a sobbing, terrified Monica out of the room. Cal took a deep, shuddering breath, composing himself. He turned his back on Roberto, who was pale and sweating, and walked over to me. He dropped to his knees in front of me, wrapping his arms around my waist and pressing his face against my pregnant belly. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm sorry you had to see that. I'm sorry I let a snake into our home." I ran my fingers through his dark hair, tears of relief falling freely. He hadn't doubted me for a single second. "I love you," I breathed, the truth slipping out before I could stop it. Cal froze. He slowly pulled back, looking up at me. His obsidian eyes were wide, vulnerable. "Say it again," he commanded softly. "I love you, Cal." A beautiful broken smile spread across his face. Before he could respond, the sound of breaking glass and a concussive blast rocked the front of the house. Chapter 7. Blood and Water. Alarms shrieked through the estate. Cal was on his feet instantly. A heavy Glock materialized in his hand from a shoulder holster. "What the hell was that?" Cal barked at Roberto, but Roberto had drawn his own weapon, and it was pointed directly at Cal's chest. Behind him, 3 of Cal's supposedly loyal guards raised their rifles, aiming them at us. "It's a change in management, boss," Roberto sneered, his mask of loyalty completely gone. "Monica might be an idiot, but her father's money funded this little coup. You've gotten soft, Cal, letting a pregnant whore dictate your business. The men are tired of it." My breath hitched. The paranoia, the hostility in the house, it hadn't been about Monica. It had been Roberto poisoning the well, turning the men against Cal by claiming I was making him weak. Suddenly, a blinding, agonizing pain ripped through my abdomen. I gasped, clutching my stomach and collapsing onto the sofa. A gush of warm fluid soaked my legs. My water had broken. I was going into labor, surrounded by traitors with guns. "Emily!" Cal yelled, glancing at me with pure terror. "Don't move, Cal!" Roberto warned, his finger tightening on the trigger. "Drop the gun. We're going to make this quick. Then I'll deal with the woman and the bastard she's carrying." That was Roberto's fatal mistake. He threatened the baby. I saw the exact moment the man I loved vanished, replaced entirely by the mythical, terrifying Don Marino. Cal didn't just drop the gun, he threw it directly at Roberto's face as a distraction, simultaneously diving to the side. Gunfire erupted, deafening and chaotic. The living room was torn to shreds. Vases exploded. Pillows burst into clouds of feathers. I screamed, curling into a tight ball on the sofa, shielding my belly as another massive contraction hit me like a freight train. Cal was a blur of lethal precision. He rolled behind a marble pillar, drawing a backup weapon from his ankle. 2 sharp cracks, and 2 of the traitorous guards dropped dead. Roberto panicked, firing wildly. Cal moved like a predator, flanking him. Roberto turned just in time to see Cal emerge from the smoke. Cal tackled Roberto to the ground with the force of a battering ram. The 2 men struggled brutally. I cried out in pain as another contraction tore through me, gripping the armrest until my knuckles turned white. With a sickening crunch, Cal shattered Roberto's wrist, taking the gun. He pinned his second-in-command to the blood-soaked rug. "You thought she made me weak?" Cal snarled, his face splattered with blood, his eyes burning with demonic fury. "She is the mother of my child. She made me lethal." Cal pulled the trigger. Roberto went limp. The house was still ringing with echoes, thick with the smell of cordite and copper. Outside, I could hear Cal's loyal men, the ones who hadn't turned, shouting and securing the perimeter. The coup had failed. Cal dropped the gun and rushed to my side. He scooped me up into his massive arms as easily as if I weighed nothing. "Hold on, sweetheart, hold on," he chanted frantically, carrying me through the ruined house toward the secure underground garage. "I've got you. You're safe." "Cal, it hurts," I sobbed, clutching his ruined, bloody shirt. "The baby is coming now." We're going to the clinic. My men are clearing the road, he promised, his jaw set in grim determination. The drive was a nightmare of pain and adrenaline. Cal held me in the back of the SUV, shouting at the driver, whispering soothing words in my ear, his hands shaking slightly as he wiped the sweat from my brow. Chapter 8. The Heir and the Heart. 20 hours later, the chaos of the Mafia war felt like a distant, fading nightmare. I lay in a pristine hospital bed, utterly exhausted, every muscle aching, but filled with a radiant, overwhelming joy. In my arms lay a tiny, perfect little boy. He had a shock of dark hair and the promise of his father's features. The door to the private suite opened quietly. Cal walked in. He had cleaned up, though he looked exhausted. The bruises on his face from the fight with Roberto were stark against his pale skin. But, as his eyes landed on me and the bundle in my arms, his entire demeanor softened into something profoundly beautiful. He walked over slowly, as if approaching a sacred altar. He sat on the edge of the bed, leaning in to look at his son. A single tear slipped down the cheek of the ruthless Mafia boss. He reached out a trembling finger, and the baby instinctively curled his tiny fist around it. "He's beautiful," Cal whispered, his voice cracking. "You did so well, Emily. I am so proud of you. He has your nose." I smiled weakly. Cal looked up from the baby to me. He reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I recognized the heavy stock instantly. It was our surrogacy contract. The document that stated I was nothing more than an incubator, to be paid and dismissed. Slowly, deliberately, Cal ripped the contract in half, then in quarters. He tossed the pieces into the nearby trash can. My heart leapt into my throat. "Cal?" He took my free hand, kissing my knuckles gently. "The contract is void," Cal said softly, his dark eyes shining with intense emotion. "Because I am a selfish, greedy man. I want a family." He shifted closer, his gaze burning into my soul. "You told me you loved me," he murmured. I didn't get to answer before all hell broke loose. "Emily, you came into my life looking to save your brother, and you ended up saving me. You melted the ice. You made me human again." "I am entirely, completely in love with you," I gasped, tears of joy welling in my eyes. Cal reached into his pocket again, this time pulling out a velvet box. He flipped it open to reveal a diamond ring so large and flawless it caught the hospital lights like a star. "Marry me, Emily," he pleaded, the man who commanded thousands begging a waitress for her hand. "Not a business deal, not an arrangement, a real marriage. Be my wife, be the queen of this family. Let me spend the rest of my life proving that I am worthy of you and our son." I looked at the man who had torn apart his own empire to keep me safe. The man who was now looking at me with absolute devotion. "Yes," I cried, a watery laugh escaping my lips. "Yes, Cal, I'll marry you." He slid the ring onto my finger, leaned in, and kissed me. It was the tender, reverent kiss of a husband. Epilogue. The sun shone brightly over the manicured lawns of the Marino estate. It had been 2 years since the night the world almost ended. The syndicate had been purged of its rot. With Roberto gone and Monica exiled, Cal had solidified his power, but he had changed the way he ruled. The violence had decreased, replaced by smarter, more legitimate business ventures. The Ice King was still feared, but he was respected more than ever. I sat on a woven blanket on the grass, watching as my brother Aaron, now 16, completely in remission, and sporting a full head of curly hair, ran across the lawn, chasing a toddler who was giggling uncontrollably. Little Aiden Marino was a tiny terror, fast on his feet and already showing his father's stubborn streak. "I still can't believe you beat him in a foot race," a deep, warm voice said from behind me. I leaned back as Cal sat down behind me, pulling me back against his broad chest. He wrapped his arms around my waist, resting his chin on my shoulder. He was wearing casual clothes, jeans, and a soft gray sweater, looking nothing like a crime boss, and everything like a devoted father. "Errands getting faster?" I smiled, leaning my head against Cal's neck. "The doctors say he's perfectly healthy." "I told you I'd take care of it," Cal murmured, kissing the shell of my ear. "You took care of all of us," I replied, turning my head to catch his lips in a soft kiss. We watched our son tackle his uncle into the grass, both of them erupting into laughter. Cal tightened his grip on me, burying his face in my hair and inhaling deeply. "I love you, Mrs. Marino," he whispered against my skin. "I love you too." "Mr. Marino," I replied. I had walked into the devil's lair hoping for a miracle to save my brother. Instead, I had found my husband, the father of my children, and a love that was stronger than fear, stronger than violence, and built to last a lifetime. I had tamed the monster, and in return, he had given me the world.
If you enjoyed this quick escape, hit the subscribe button for new stories twice a week. Until then, I'll see you at the next flip of the pages.